You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. Welcome to Dolphins Talk Weekly, your one-stop audio breakdown of all of this week's Miami Dolphins news. Now, here is your host, Kevin Durr.
Kingswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Kingswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida, Kingswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Kingswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship to you. International fans, too. Kingswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Kingswear.com, Kingswear.com. And welcome into a new episode of Dolphins Talk Weekly. It's long overdue. I am your host, Kevin Dern. You can follow me on X at KevinMD4. You can follow the show on DolphinsTalk.com, Spotify, Podbean, iTunes, wherever else you listen to your podcasts. And please be sure to check out all of the shows and articles on DolphinsTalk.com. I know Mike and Marissa have been crushing it lately with some of the guests they've had on for interviews. So just make sure you check out all that DolphinsTalk.com family content. It's been a great run, and I do apologize for having a lengthy gap between episodes here in the off season. My professional life has gotten considerably more busy, leading a global team and expanding the workload that we've had. Almost ended up taking a position in Seattle, which would have been a heck of a summer move for myself, but ultimately decided against that. Just got back from a week-long vacation to Miramar Beach, Florida with the kids and my wife. Check out Lily's Barbecue if you're ever down there. The brisket was fantastic, probably the best I think I've ever had. Sensational. A lot to get into tonight, but first, a bit of a somber note to kick off the show, unfortunately. We'll tie this with the whiskey segment, because this will go out to her, and we'll dedicate the show to her. But for those of you that are new to the Dolphins Talk Weekly podcast or don't remember, I got my start podcasting, co-hosting the Finalysis podcast with Travis Wingfield back in 2016 as part of the Welcome to Perfectville family of podcasts with Sam Marcoux and Chris Cullen. And my wife and I had a pit lab named Chloe. We had to put her down last night. Chloe was almost 15 years old. The best dog I've ever had or will have. And she had been there for damn near every episode. There's only two that I can think of where she wasn't laying in the floor or laying under my feet while I recorded. I called her my co-host. And I think the two that she wasn't there for were, one was because I recorded it not at my house, and two, the other one I recorded on a weekend afternoon, and my wife was taking her for a walk at the time. The guys from the Perfectville family, and maybe some of the fans who've been listening, you guys might remember, but, Chloe was always there. She was always pretty quiet. Other than the episode where a rogue snossage rolled under a refrigerator and she went ballistic, and her squealing was so funny that Sam just left it in the podcast. And I'll miss Chloe. She was the best dog, and I was planning on recording last night and couldn't for obvious reasons. So this one's for you, Chloe. With that said, let's shift gears into Dolphins content. Last night, obviously, we had the Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith pick exchange trade, or trades, however it's broken down. And I made a thread about the Minkah Fitzpatrick acquisition and my thoughts on it, and mostly just to keep my mind off of the situation with Chloe yesterday. But in the thread, I promised I would give my thoughts on the Jalen Ramsey speculation of a trade and all that stuff. And I had an outline written for this show, and literally the first topic was Jalen Ramsey trade. I didn't have any inside information other than I'd gotten tipped off that it might go down soon. Obviously did not expect it to go down yesterday as I record this on Tuesday night the 1st. Was going to talk about a potential cornerback signing and what they would do in the wake of moving Jalen Ramsey, Zach Sealer's situation, Johnny Smith's situation, some general news, and some news that I know I have that you won't get on any other Dolphins podcast or YouTube show. And then I was going to start a series on position rooms and do like a primer for each one as we get closer to training camp and at the end of the month, and wanted to produce some more content for you all. And we'll see if we can get through all of that. It'll be a meaty episode for sure. So strap in, stay tuned, pour yourself a drink, grab a snack, and we'll do this. So Jalen Ramsey, by now you've probably heard Teron Armstead going on the podcast with Mark Ingram and talking about, Jalen Ramsey, if they held on to him, he wasn't going to show up, he wasn't going to play. The root cause of the issue is he does not like Mike McDaniel, did not like the way Mike McDaniel called him out in front of the entire team, trying to hold him accountable. Is kind of the crux of the situation. I think Jalen Ramsey at this point, he's a declining player, still pretty damn good, but you could see the fall off last year. You think back to even week 1, he had the egregious pass interference penalty. You think to week 2, he got beat on a wheel route by the Bills' third running back for a touchdown in that game. Got beat like a drum by Garrett Wilson in the Jets game at home. I think mentally is a little bit of a soft player, and kind of marches to the beat of his own drum, hired gun type guy. And quite frankly, squeezed more money out of Miami than he was worth, more than the trouble was worth. So glad he's gone, and pretty impressed that they got, if you break the transactions down, they got Minkah Fitzpatrick back for him. So I think it's good, all in all, good work by Chris Grier, especially, to get something back for Jalen Ramsey, because the whole league knew that he didn't want to be there. He wanted traded. The Dolphins had made it public that they wanted to move him. So you're handing away the leverage you have in this scenario. And to get back Minkah Fitzpatrick for him, I think is a pretty nice stroke. And for those that didn't read it, I'll go through the thread on my thoughts on Minkah Fitzpatrick. I guess Jalen Ramsey, thank you for your service. Glad you got the money that you were looking for. Good luck in Pittsburgh. You're going to freeze your ass off in the winter. From one Midwester to now another. Take it from me. You're not going to like it there, I don't think. And I think that's going to be a carnival ride in Pittsburgh with the way that they've kind of gone about their business this offseason. I'd be surprised if he's there for more than a year, because it looks like Pittsburgh is kind of throwing up a Hail Mary, and if it doesn't work, they can. And Omar Khan, who I actually somewhat know personally from a long time ago, has set things up right where they can course correct and shift after this season if need be. So goodbye, farewell, so long, Jalen Ramsey. I'm not going to miss you, for a second. With Minkah Fitzpatrick, this is the thread. I'll just read through it. It's still up on my X feed, but first, I think it's imperative that Miami has to use him as a free safety in more of a true sense than the Steelers did last year. Towards the end of the season, they started playing him more in the box, used him a lot as a robber. I think with Miami's defense, using Minkah as a box safety is a bit of a disservice and not the best use of his skill set. That should be Ife Melifonwu, who reprises that role from Detroit. It's kind of the Kyle Hamilton-ish role, and he should be used to that, given that Brian Duker is now Miami's secondary coach and was with Melifonwu in Detroit. So I think now your top combination is Minka and Melifonwu, which gives me some relief because I was not a big fan of Ashton Davis. But if you use Minka as a middle of the field safety in the cover 3 stuff, and you use him as a split field safety in cover 2, you can use him interchangeably as a left and right safety in quarters. You can play him in the slot if you need to in big nickel situations. I like it. It's intriguing. It opens doors. You know, what this move ought to bring about is Miami not having to rely on Ashton Davis as a full-fledged starter. Again, that's a good thing. But it also allows you to play 3 safety looks, which is something they didn't do last year. And I think the easiest solution is to have Minka and Ashton Davis be your 2-deep guys, your split field guys, with Melifonwu playing that Kyle Hamilton-ish role. And it also allows you to keep Kader Kohou outside when needed. And if some of this sounds familiar, I know at least a couple people kind of took this thread and tried to make it their own on some other shows. So, you know, just know that I had this out last night. Anyway, you know, Kohou was pretty good at playing outside corner in cover 2, the zone coverage, not 2-man, but cover 2 zone, in some of the quarters assignments. And Miami loves to disguise their coverages. They also rotated, and most people don't realize this, they also rotated Kader Kohou post-snap a lot into a half-field safety position. So this could be an advantage of having Minka, as you can tap into his corner skills while still playing it safe. Like, I don't think you want him lined up one-on-one, matching up with, like, the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Browns of the world. But you can give him some assignments as a flat defender in cover 2, you know, when you need to mix it up. He's smart. He's still a good tackler. Had a slight dip in tackling in 24. But this is something that should boost Miami, especially in run defense. Poyer was absolute garbage. Probably my least favorite player ever to play for the Dolphins. Javon Holland was selective at best. So Minka, you know, with the recognition skills, his work ethic, his ability to prepare, I think he's going to be the traffic cop of the secondary. And given Melifonwu's injury history, Davis being in a new scheme, Trader being a rookie, you know, I think that's a huge boost. I was more concerned about safety than corner at this juncture. I'd imagine Dante Trader kind of latches on to Minka in terms of studying work ethic, habits. So that's another ancillary benefit. And above all, if it doesn't work out, Minka's 26 money isn't guaranteed, so you can course correct if you need to. So it's a medium risk for this assignment for a player that's still pretty good. And I think one of the things that kind of gets messed up here is everyone kind of has been running with this narrative that the Dolphins are going to play press man. Now, I can't reveal where this came from, but I know this quote originates from Anthony Weaver. And I think other people in the media got hold of it and kind of ran with it in the wrong direction. Playing more press, I don't think at all means that Miami's going to shift to a heavy cover 1 philosophy the way they were under Flores and Boyer, or the way that the Belichick defenses were in New England. What I think it means is they want to be able to use that in their menu more than they did last year. Think like a 10% increase. It also means with the body types that they have at corner, you can play more press and disrupt timing and releases, which is especially helpful in cover 2 stuff. You see it a lot in cover 3. I mean, the Seahawks made a living off of it with Richard Sherman, Brandon Browner, Byron Maxwell in their Legion of Boom days, playing cover 3 with press. So effectively, the too long didn't read version is Minka, much like Kenneth Grant up front, is a force multiplier. He'll allow others to become better by how they're used. He's smart. He can be the traffic cop. He's still good at getting downhill versus the run. It's a smart, you know, relatively low, medium risk addition with a friendly, team-friendly contract structure if it doesn't work out. I like the move quite a bit, and I'm still pretty wary of like Ashton Davis being Ashton Davis and Melifonwu's injury history. So kudos to Chris Greer for getting this done and getting Minka. As far as Jonnu Smith goes, yeah, it's a bit of a hole, but the tight end really wasn't a big part of Miami's offense in 22 and 23 when they were better. Like Durham Smythe was the best tight end we had in those 2 years, and I think the most he caught was 30 passes in a season. I think Miami's probably felt a little bit burned by veterans asking for more money. Jalen Ramsey, Tyreek. They didn't learn their lesson the first time they put their hand on the hot stove. So I think this may have been a little bit of that, where it's like, okay, we can't let these veterans keep seeking more money. When we sign them to a contract, they outplay the level of it, but they still have more years left on the deal. So, Jonnu Smith was, I think, already 30 or going to be 30 into the season. You only had him for one more year anyway. And there's a bunch of stats and stuff going around about how Miami's best formation last year was 11 personnel, and you kind of need an all-around tight end who can block well to make that formation and personnel grouping work. So that isn't Jonnu. I think by moving on from him and essentially getting the pick swap, getting a fifth rounder 2 years from now, it's fine. You got something instead of nothing. As far as making up that production, I think you are naturally going to see more of it kind of just be dispersed. And Travis Wingfield brought up this point on his show. You were going to see Devon Achane get used more as a receiver this year because of Jalen Wright. You were going to see him get more targets in the passing game. You were going to see them give an expanded role to Malik Washington. You were going to have Nick Westbrook-Akine, who's probably going to play a mix of like true X receiver and a mix of big slot, the way that they had Trent Sherfield in 2022 playing. That's going to get some targets as well. So, like the Jonnu Smith move, yeah, he had a great season. He set some team records. And he was a pretty good force after the catch. I think that physicality he brought, the ball in his hand, is something that Miami still lacks, even with the addition of Darren Waller, which we'll get into in a moment. But I think ultimately, if this leads you to a better blocking solution with your 11 personnel, Pharaoh Brown, Julian Hill, possibly someone else, then I think ultimately you're still going to set your team up for success, even if you have a dip in production from the tight end position. So this one, kind of a net neutral to me. You got something instead of nothing. The Darren Waller one, this is Frank Smith just sticking his head in the guillotine at this point. I saw the news, had to read it 2 or 3 times to fully digest it. This just has a bad stink to it. I'd be pretty surprised if this pans out in any sort of positive way. This is the type of player I think you were all off season trying to get rid of on your roster. And now you brought one back in. He's an older player. He quit on the Giants last year because he didn't want to block. Or 2 years ago, I guess. This just seems like adding a bad egg to the basket. I am not a fan of this. I am not a fan of this in the same vein I was not a fan of them ever signing Jordan Poyer. This feels like a pretty bad mistake if he makes it to the roster and has any sort of heavy contributing role. I would hope that there's some other move that's going to go along with this if you really want to bolster your tight end room. This one it doesn't make a lot of sense to me on any level. The compensation doesn't bother me. You gave up something and you're getting something back with Waller. Fine. It's a late day 3 pick. Fine. I don't know what else to say other than this one seems pretty fucking out of left field, and I just don't see this working. I would say try again. But the Dolphins are the Dolphins for a reason, and it's moves like this that keep them being the Dolphins sometimes. And I'm not a fan of this one at all. Moving on from that, I will say I haven't been able to get double confirmation on this, but I have heard from a pretty trusted source that they are working on an extension for defensive tackle Zach Sealer. They have some additional cap space freed up after the Jalen Ramsey trade. I think that probably puts an impetus on this getting done. I don't think you would want to move off Sealer at this point, just given how well he's played, especially the last 2 years in his Dolphins tenure. And I am very intrigued to see how he and Kenneth Grant are as a duo at defensive tackle. So I think that's kind of the next domino to occur as an extension for Sealer. What about a corner signing? That one seems to be kind of the interesting position where they really haven't made a move. You know, I thought going back, if they hadn't traded up for Jonas Savaiinaea, maybe you trade up from 98 and get in on the corner run in the draft that took place from like 73 to 86. But you didn't have resources there. We know that they've offered a deal to Rasul Douglas. They had conversations with Jair Alexander. We know that they have talked to representatives from Asante Samuel Jr. There's a rumor out there that they may be interested in Jack Jones. So I think something is coming, but I don't have a guess as to what. Like, this is just pure swag right here. Asante Samuel seems like the guy that would fit the best, given his age, given what Miami plays schematically, and how Samuel was successful with the Chargers. A lot of that cover two, the pattern matching stuff, being able to play zone, a lot of quarters where you'd have help. That fits the bill to me of Asante Samuel. So, getting into some news, I can go ahead and confirm a couple things. So, like, I know there's the whole, like, people are surprised that Jonas Savaiinaea has been the left guard. I'll let you in on a secret. He's been the left guard ever since they drafted him. There it is. James Daniels kind of tipped the hand when he did the interview with Travis Wingfield one-on-one after they signed him, and he said, you know, I'm looking forward to playing between the center and the right tackle, meaning Aaron Brewer and Austin Jackson. I'll go further. James Daniels hasn't been cleared to play yet through OTAs and minicamp. The offensive line, left to right, has been Patrick Paul, Jonas Savaiinaea, Aaron Brewer. They've rotated two guys, Keon Smith and Jackson Carman, at right guard. And then Austin Jackson has been the right tackle. So, interestingly, like, you would think that Keon Smith would be a candidate to be a swing tackle. Jackson Carman has played left and right tackle in the NFL. He's also played left guard. Had his best year as a left guard in Cincinnati in their Super Bowl run back in 2021. But I like the fact that Miami want to put Savaiinaea at left guard and leave James Daniels at right guard. Having Daniels next to Austin Jackson kind of gives you the Rob Hunt vibe next to Austin Jackson, where you've got two really good run-blocking players. If you're going to recapture the magic of this offense that we saw in 22 early on, more of it in 2023, you need to run the ball. You need to run the ball. And having like a dominant side of Daniels and Jackson as run blockers, not saying they're dominant pass blockers, but as run blockers, I think that makes a lot more sense than trying to have, a veteran next to a rookie or a young player. Patrick Paul, like, putting it into perspective, played 337 snaps last year as a rookie. Keon Smith has been on the Dolphins roster since 2021. He was an undrafted free agent from the Brian Flores era. He's played 70 snaps. So the whole experience thing, I think, is relative. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to handhold Patrick Paul. He played last year next to Robert Jones, who below average player. I would expect at worst Jonas Vainea comes in and can give you equal level of play to Rob Jones. So I'm not too worried about that. I applaud the Dolphins for making that line the way it is. The starting five, if they stay healthy, I think is a solid enough line to at least improve your running game from where it was last year to middle of the pack. I don't know if it'll be like number 2 or 3 or whatever it was in 2023, but it'll be better than it was last year. The offensive line depth, that's another story, and they were the position group I was going to cover in the next episode. The other interesting news is it goes back to corner. I can tell you since minicamp, when they've opened with 2 corners, the top tandem so far has been Kader Kohu and Storm Duck. You have some more options now with the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. Obviously, he wasn't there for OTAs and minicamp to play some 3 safety stuff, so that helps you out a little bit. But what was really intriguing to me is that in minicamp, because he wasn't there for some of the OTAs, but in minicamp, the 3rd corner that came onto the field was Kendall Sheffield. Mark Kelly kind of spilled that, but I'll confirm it. And they did it over Cam Smith, who, by all accounts, had a pretty good offseason in minicamp, other than getting roasted one time deep by Jalen Waddle. But I think Miami really wants Cam Smith to, become tougher both physically and mentally. Go out, earn the job, win the role. I think they want him to be that guy so you don't have to rely on, a signing like Asante Samuel Jr. or Jack Jones or having to trade more assets for another player. I think they want Cam Smith to go out and win it, but that's a pretty risky bet. I think you need a hedge somewhere to balance out the youth of that position. I wouldn't trust Jason Marshall right off the bat as a rookie to take big strides. Maybe you can spoon feed him the way you did Storm Duck last year. Same possibly goes for BJ Adams. Ethan Bonner, I know everyone's high on, but he's done nothing in 2 years other than some mop-up duty under Fangio because Fangio didn't like Cam Smith. I think that's one that needs to be moved on from. So that's kind of the interesting news that you wouldn't really find anywhere else. Moving on, I think the last segment I want to touch on, and this is something that I've had as a pinned, I don't know what you call them nowadays, but a pinned tweet on X, and it's kind of a handy-dandy guide that I made for anyone who wants to listen or read it or learn more about defensive line play. I think as a whole, they're making a pretty risky bet that reprising the combination of Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb is going to boost their defense even higher than it was last year, which if you go back, Anthony Weaver did a nice job of making chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. 10th in points allowed, 4th in overall defense, 9th in run defense, 9th in pass defense. I believe they were in the top 10 for third down defense. I think really the one area, or the 2 areas you struggled were sacks and turnovers. I think Minka Fitzpatrick helps that. Getting Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb back helps. Another year of Chop Robinson helps. Kenneth Grant's going to help. I feel much better about the spine of this team, the D-tackle, linebacker, safety, especially now with Fitzpatrick in tow. But one of the things that kind of bothered me in some of like the post-draft like coverage and putting players into roles and slotting them is I don't think a lot of fans really have an idea or inclination of the techniques and alignments of how these things work. So I posted this on May 30th, and it's pinned to my X feed now if you want to check it out. But basically, I did this in Excel and mapped out, the different alignments versus where they go against a offensive lineman. So the easiest way to think of it is the even-numbered techniques are straight, head up, nose to nose. Well, as my old football coach used to say, nose to nose, belly to belly, dick to dick against another player. You're head up. You're mano a mano. A 0 technique is over the center, and you work out. 2 technique is over either guard. A 4 technique is over either tackle. A 6 technique is over a tight end. The very rare and seldom used 8 technique is the widest, which would be over a second tight end or a wing type of player. The odd-numbered techniques are basically shading or half-man techniques. So it's the outside shoulder of a player. So 1 technique is the outside shoulder of the center. 3 is the outside shoulder of a guard. 5 is the outside shoulder of a tackle. Here's where it gets weird. A 7 technique is the inside shoulder of a tight end. A 9 technique is the outside shoulder of a tight end. And then you have the inside shoulder techniques, 2-eye, 4-eye, which would be the inside shoulder of a guard and the inside shoulder of a tackle. And more often than not, what we're going to see from Anthony Weaver's defense is going to look very similar to how Vic Fangio structured the front in 2023, and very similar to how Josh Boyer structured the front in 2022 once they acquired Bradley Chubb. And that's you're going to be playing some variation of a wide 9 defense, meaning you're likely going to have a 2-eye technique on the weak side, a 3 technique on the strong side as your D tackles, a 5 technique on the weak side as your edge rusher, and a 9 technique on the strong side. And what I wanted to represent is where Miami's current D tackle and edge players fit in those traditional looks. So if you go through it, and I think the first 5 guys are probably who I would peg to be on the roster in the D tackle group. So Kenneth Grant, I think he's going to play anywhere from 3 technique on one side to 3 technique on the other. You can play him as a head-up guy. You can play him as a shade guy, inside or outside shoulder. Doesn't matter. Most of his damage at Michigan came from playing in a 2-eye or a 3, which is perfect because in tandem, that's how Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer were at their best in 2023 under Fangio. I think effectively you're just swapping out Christian Wilkins 2 years later and putting Kenneth Grant in to team with Zach Sealer. Sealer, in my eyes, is the most versatile defensive tackle Miami has. I don't think you would ever really want him as a 0 technique unless it's some sort of like exotic third down package. But in normal down and distance stuff, he can play anywhere from a 1 out to a 5. So meaning he can play outside shade of a tackle, especially if you're running some sort of under or over front with a heavy end. Miami had to do that a lot last year because they didn't have Chubb. Phillips got hurt. Emmanuel Ogbah was playing with a torn bicep. So there were times when they played Sealer and Campbell as 5 techniques because they had to, out of necessity. But Sealer can do it. I think he's best playing 4 technique and in. Really 2-eye to 4 on either side is his bread and butter. Benito Jones, weirdly, even though he's built like a prototypical nose tackle, played better as a 3 technique and a 1 technique last year. You can play him in some of those even head up techniques, but I don't think he's best served there. I think he's more of a direct backup to Kenneth Grant, who isn't quite as versatile. The one that I take umbrage with is everyone was like, oh, well, Jordan Phillips, small, squatty, powerful guy, power lifter. That's a nose tackle. I vehemently disagree. If you watch his tape at Maryland, even though he's in a 4-point stance right over the center, there's a lot of instances where he's still the last Maryland Terrapin, like, off the ball. And he's right there. There's a lot of instances on tape where he gets washed out badly by one lineman. Watch him versus the Northwestern center, and then watch Michigan and Kenneth Grant versus the Northwestern center. Which one of the guys looks like it's going to be an undrafted free agent? I'll give you a clue. It's not Kenneth Grant. But if you look at the tape and watch when Jordan Phillips gets to line up not in a 1 technique or a 0 technique, when he's out playing a 2-eye or a 3 or a 4-eye, you see some explosiveness. You see him shooting gaps. You see him being able to, he's nowhere near the lateral athlete that Kenneth Grant is. Kenneth Grant is an absolute freak of nature. But he actually makes plays like laterally a little bit. You know, you consider that Jordan Phillips had 2 tackles for loss and 0 sacks his entire college career. Like, Kenneth Grant had more than that in 1/2 against USC in 1 game last year. But what's intriguing is you couple Jordan Phillips, you couple those flashes you see when he's not lined up as a nose tackle. We know that Miami's assistant D-line coach, Najee Thornton, went down to the East-West Shrine game, changed his stance, put him in a 3-point stance, let him play some 3 technique, some 2-eye, and he tore up everybody in practice. That, to me, is what you need to develop Jordan Phillips as first. Someone who can play 3 technique, 2-eye, maybe some 4-eye, before you start pigeonholing him back inside the nose tackle, because I just don't think being short-armed as he is, he's going to make much of a living as a nose tackle in the NFL. The offensive linemen are just too good. Matthew Butler, underrated addition. I think he gives you kind of that explosive guy. You could play him as a 5 technique D-end in the over and under fronts out of a 4-3 if you want to do that. But he gives you like a quicker 3 technique. I wouldn't ever want to play him any tighter than a 2-eye. I think he's kind of a 3 technique only. To me, he's sort of like the guy who could be like the Brett Urban role that the Ravens had. But that's kind of where it stops. And then Zeke Biggers, I'd be impressed if he made the roster. I don't think he's a nose tackle. He plays way too high. I think you're better served trying to build him into someone who can play 2-eye out to 4-eye using that length if he can keep his weight down. Like, to me, I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this. He's sort of like the very B-list version of like Akeem Hicks, who played really good football for the Bears for a while, especially under Fangio in 2018. Like, he's just an oversized, like, 3 technique, not going to be explosive, but someone who can just be a run stopper, you know, or maybe like a skinnier Alan Branch from back in the day, someone like that. That's what I think Zeke Biggers develops into eventually, but I would be surprised if he made the roster. Next, so I think the 5 D tackles that make it: Grant, Sealer, Jones, Phillips, Butler. Your edge group, your defensive ends, you can call them outside linebackers if you want. They're aligned as defensive ends, so that's what I call them. But those are the 3 of them are the obvious guys: Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. I think Quentin Bell has some additional value because he can play as like a true Sam linebacker and, you know, set the edge against a tight end as an edge backer in some of those under and over fronts. So all of those guys are very effective as 9 techniques. Phillips and Chubb specifically can play as 5 techniques, both on the strong or the weak side. Chop Robinson, I think, is more of an obligate edge player. Like, you need to play him as a wide player no matter what, whether he's on the weak side or the strong side. So that means you need to play him as a 9 on the strong side and a 5 or a wide 5 on the weak side. I think there's a few things you could do fungibly with him as a 7 technique inside of the tight end if you know that tight end isn't going to block, but I wouldn't want to do it frequently. Now, third down, exotic looks, I think you could play Chop Robinson as like a stand-up linebacker in like a 0-0 or a 10 technique inside and let him be like a nose backer and rush. I think Jalen Phillips you could put as a 3 technique. He hasn't done it since his rookie year. I think there's a couple clips like spliced in there. But if you really wanted to be pretty wicked, you could put he and Chop together on one side and run twist games with them, with one of them rushing over a guard. And then I think Willie Gay Jr. has some interesting things he can do as a pass rush guy. You could play him as a Sam backer. You can play him head up over guards or any of the techniques he would line up as a nose backer just because he's a good athlete, decent blitzer. Really, to me, the battle you're going to see up here and what I guess we would call like the front 6, if we're being realistic, is after your top 3 pass rushers, after your top 3, is Quentin Bell there by default because he's a good special teamer and can play as an edge linebacker, as an edge setter, a run stopper? Maybe. I think there's value in that. Or do you try and unlock more from Mo Kamara, who had some flashes, like the Indianapolis game in particular, the road game against Buffalo, the road game against Houston. There were a couple plays where he's, showing you some things. Obviously needs more development, but I wanted to make that chart to kind of show where I think people will be, what their strengths and weaknesses are. So like if you look at the chart, if there's, an S in that box, it means I think it's a player's strength. If there's nothing in the box, I think it's, okay, the player can do it. It's serviceable. It's not great. It's not bad. If it's a weakness, it's something that the player can do. He can play there, but it's not the optimal alignment for him to be in. So I have this up on my pinned, profile on X. I would encourage you to check it out if you want to learn more about front 7 alignments and how everything works with the D-line. To finish off the episode tonight, one of the interesting things to me was that the main combinations they used in minicamp, not that there are starters because the defense is much more heavily rotation based on the front line than the O-line is. And I think they did sort of the veteran move where, like, if you had a front 4, it was Sealer, Benito Jones, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, the 4 vets. What was interesting is that meant you had Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips kind of working together. Maybe 2-3 years down the road, that is your starting tandem. But I would be very shocked if Kenneth Grant isn't the primary partner of Zach Sealer once the season gets started. And then Quentin Bell was the 4th pass rusher with Chop Robinson quite a bit. So just some interesting stuff I could pass along that I don't think you're going to get anywhere else. That's going to do it for this week's episode. I'm going to try and have one out over the long weekend about the offensive line and where I think the guys fit. Again, stay safe. Have a happy 4th. Chloe, thank you for everything. You were the best dog. I'm going to miss you. And that'll do it for us. You can follow me on X at KevinMD4. You can follow the show on DolphinsTalk.com, anywhere you listen to your podcast. Be sure to check out the other podcasts and the authors at DolphinsTalk.com. They've been doing some phenomenal work. I will be ramping up as we gear towards the season and trying to do at least an episode a week from here until the end of the season. That's going to do it for me. Happy 4th, everybody. Fins up. This episode of Dolphins Talk Weekly was brought to you by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship to you. International fans too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com, Caneswear.com.